Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NCMA. I am Leela Urquhart. I am the museum's Chief Advancement Officer, and I am delighted to have the honor of welcoming all of you to this special presentation of our recently published book, Ancient Greek, Italian, and Roman Art. Now, that's not because I really love very large, systematically researched collections of archaeological objects, although I think many of you think I'm joking that I like those. No, I really do, as my poor husband would clearly attest to after moving boxes of them many, many times. No, the real reason I'm very happy to be celebrating and doing this introduction is because this lecture and gathering of friends is truly to celebrate the remarkable work put in by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Caroline Rocheleau, in producing this catalog. Many of you here today are members and donors, or you have been part of the Friends of Greek and Classical Art, and you've been a very integral part of the production of this catalog. And so I want to first and foremost thank you for your very loyal and enduring support for allowing us to bring this to fruition. But I also know that many of you are aware that the conceptualization and research for this work began over a decade ago. When Caroline realized how much of an impact and how much benefit it would bring to the museum to comprehensively study the objects that comprise our ancient Greek, Italian, and Roman collections. Producing a work like this requires not just extraordinary vision and energy, it also requires persistence, intellectual vigor, a willingness to stretch beyond one's own field of expertise and comfort. And the volume that we'll be discussing today exemplify those virtues as they do for Caroline herself. I am so delighted that you can all be here to help us celebrate her and to really mark this milestone for both the ancient collections as well as the NCMA as a whole. So for those of you who do not know Caroline, let me give you a brief introduction. Caroline Rocheleau holds a PhD in Egyptology and Nubiology from the University of Toronto, Canada, with research focused on the material cultures of ancient Egypt and Sudan. She has excavated at the ancient Sudanese sites of Merowe, Dungale, and Sedanga, and serves here at the NCMA as Director of Research and Curator of Ancient Collections. Her publications are numerous. You could collect the whole series of works in her volumes. And she's also produced a number of exhibitions here at the NCMA. Indeed, on top of publishing the volume about which we are going to hear in just a moment, Caroline is organizing the NCMA's fall exhibition, Ancient Nubia: Excavating Treasures of the Nile, opening this October. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Caroline Rocheleau to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Leela, for this lovely introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll be candid, I have to say that when Advancement came to me asking, would you like to celebrate with the membership, with the museum, this accomplishment, I was a little bit surprised, but I was actually really delighted, because publications, unlike exhibitions, do not get a press release. We don't get an opening party. So this really actually does mean a whole lot to me to be sharing this moment with you. 13 years in the making. Before I start, I too have to do little acknowledgements and thank yous. None of this would have been possible without the Anne and Jim Goodnight / Andrew Mellon Foundation Fund for Curatorial and Conservation Research and Travel. This is what basically allows us to bring scholars to work with us. As Leela mentioned, I am an Egyptologist and a Nubiologist. I am not a specialist of ancient Greek anything or Roman anything. So I knew I could not do this alone. Also, the Friends of Greek Art, who have supported me and my work since I started as the curator of ancient collections in 2011, their endowment, but also subsequent fundraising campaigns have actually made sure that the collection catalog that you see today outside over there was funded. The publication, the printing of it was funded by this endowment and other funds that came in. Samantha Fassel and an anonymous donor are also to be thanked for contributing to specifically to this catalog. The book itself, I have to thank Laura, our NCMA editor, and Dan, graphic designer. They're the ones who put the words and images into this beautiful volume. And thank you to many staff members and interns who helped in some way, shape, or form over the last 13 years with this major endeavor. Of course, I cannot thank enough the people who responded to the call, all the contributors that you see listed here. And one of the things that we noted and that Valerie mentioned in her director's forward is that more than half of them have a connection to North Carolina. And I will just single them out just because that connection means they're familiar with the objects here. They lived in North Carolina for a while, if not still. So Nick Blackwell was a teaching fellow at NC State. Brian Burns got his undergraduate from UNC Chapel Hill. Nancy LeGrummond got her PhD from UNC Chapel Hill as well. Keely Hoyer went to Duke, so we're covering the big three universities there. She got an undergraduate. You don't count me because I work here. And Laurel Taylor is currently a professor at UNC Asheville. So that's the North Carolina connection. But as I am not a classical scholar, my network was a little bit meager. And oddly enough, because Egypt, Greece, and Rome are often collected by the same institutions, I could use my Egyptological network to get to the classical scholars that I needed to help me with this particular project. So I think we'll just get started because there's lots to cover. So today will be a little bit more anecdotal. We've given a few talks that kind of touch a little bit like science at the art museum and things like this. So I know some of you are regulars. I recognize a lot of faces in the audience. So I came up with a brand new PowerPoint that really focuses on the research and how it was accomplished. So as Leela mentioned, not a classical scholar, I started at the museum almost 21 years ago as a research fellow, a postdoc, and working exclusively on the Egyptian collection. And that is one of the publications that our library team is showcasing outside. That was published in 2012. I became curator in 2011. And within a year of being on the job, I had already published my area of expertise. So what do I do now? I have to branch out. I have no choice. So 2012, there's me, the little hamster, thinking, what do I do? What do I do? I think maybe ancient Greece, Italy, and Rome is what I'll be researching. And 2013 was the start of that very, very long process. So in that part of the world, scholars specialize either by material, by culture. So what you have listed here are the different sections of the collection that were studied by different scholars. And we'll go through them in that order from 2013 until today. Everything was well documented. This is where I'm pulling all my photos from. Just in case you're wondering how an archaeologist and a curator documents this stuff, a lot of photos and folders and images and text. So the first collection we started with was actually the marble sculptures through a connection via our conservation department. I met a classical scholar who was specializing in this area specifically. So for all the sections we'll go through, you'll see these images, and then we'll see them again after the study and see if they're still all on the list. Because that's not in the catalog. If it didn't make the cut, it is not in the catalog. All right, so studying the marbles, this is probably one of the most complicated areas because you will do a lot of scientific analysis on the marbles. This might not be the case for a lot of the other objects for a variety of reasons. So we started in 2013, and yes, I'm going to put the dates on the slide so you know how long it took. Labor of love, I tell you. And all the consultants are mentioned by name on the slide. So we started with this, and with this kind of collection with marbles, you can do a lot of scientific analysis, also scholarly, obviously, and you will see a person's name mentioned many times. I'm hoping she's watching. So Corey Smith Riley, who is listed here as Riley Conservation Services. She's now an employee of the museum, but when we started, we had no objects conservator. So I had to hire somebody to do that job. So you will see her name on many, many slides. So one of the things that we wanted to do with the marble sculptures, let me just go back for a second. You do different kinds of things, and you really want to look at the style of the sculpture, but with marble, we can also take samples and figure out where the quarry, where that marble came from, might be. And for something as vast as the Roman Empire, there are multiple possibilities. So we did this for all the objects. And there were some statues that really caught our scholars' attention, Mark Abbey, because they were composite sculptures. In other words, Mr. Potato Head sculptures. So they have a core, and there are fragments attached to it that may or may not belong to this original and ancient core. So how do you look inside a statue? We can try x-rays, but marble is too thick. You can't do that. So we had to call in the big guys, the guys who usually do this with pipelines, for example. So gamma ray is what we did. So that's what you have right over here, where they're just industrial x-rays, basically, trying to look inside the statue to see if all the fragments belonged or not. That was like one of the most exciting things we've done at the museum. And we even blocked off the tunnel so that no staff member would go in that special room because we're using gamma rays. Gamma rays are what turned Ted or Bruce Banner into the Hulk, depending on which you're reading. So staff members would like run past the sign. It's like, yeah, I don't want to be anywhere near this. But it was like super fun because you hardly ever get to do things like this in a museum. And we'll know a little bit more about that later, those composite sculptures. So other things that we do, and some of these things like UV examination, for example, we're just using a black light looking at the works of art. Conservators do this day in, day out. And that allows us to see maybe there are breaks, maybe there's fill material, maybe there's patinas on the works of art. So it's that picture right here. There's our friend Heracles or Hercules under the blue light. We also occasionally use red light. And we've done this specifically for pigment analysis. So a lot of the statues that you see in museums around the world all look white. In ancient times, they were not white at all. they were colored in some way, shape, or form, whether it was paint applied to them, or maybe they were gilded, or maybe there was a part of the statue that was made from a different stone and they're attached together. So let's think of a mantle of a Roman emperor in the red colored stone with a white marble head, for example. So that's a way to have colored works of art where they're not just a white thing. That's a Renaissance thing. So one specific pigment that we wanted to find with the VIL, which is the visible induced luminescence that uses infrared light. So you see Corey right here with her bat signal, waving it around so that the marble head that you see there, this one actually might be limestone, and taking a photo while we're doing that. And then on the photo, if there is Egyptian blue, which is a man-made pigment, that pigment will fluoresce bright white. So we did this for every single sculpture to see if there was Egyptian blue. And well, clearly there's a lot of Egyptian blue in this one. For this one, very, very strange, we found 3 grains. It is that brilliant, like that fluorescent, that you can actually spot a single grain of Egyptian blue. And Mark took a sample right here. This is magnified multiple times. And with some of the other pigments, sometimes you can see them with your eye. Others, we use modified infrared cameras for other things that you look through. You can just change the light on your Photoshop and see different things on the photos that are produced from this session. And we took some samples as well. That is the one part of the catalog that did not come into fruition. Unfortunately, I'm hoping we'll have maybe an article that talks about the pigment analysis. So I mentioned marble sampling earlier. Here's our friend Hercules. Once again, we're taking samples, and taking samples means this is a destructive method. You have to take a teeny part of the object. So we try not to do this unless it is absolutely necessary. But we did this for every single sculpture. And here, this is just an example to show you how meticulous we are in selecting the sample location. There's a teeny X right there. This is where we're going to drill. So he looks like he's being held up, at the bank in a Western movie or something. But this is where we're drilling. And we're taking 2 kinds of sample. One is a big chunk, about a big chunk the size of like my pinky nail, or maybe like one of those erasers on your pencils. And then we have to take a powdered sample, and you do it within the hole where you took the other one. And in this case, it really blends in with his hairstyle. So most people don't even notice. This statue has multiple sample locations. Most people don't notice. There's like a mosquito bite on his ankle. There's one on his hand. I dare you to go look after the lecture. Can you spot all the places where those samples were taken? So this is what the samples look like. We're doing 2 kinds of analysis, petrographic and isotopic. And we're looking for either the mineralogical composition and textures of these samples of marble or the isotopic signature with the powdered one. And this is what the report looks like when it gets back to you. It means diddly squat to a curator. Just tell me where the marble quarry is, which Scott obviously did as well. So after we studied the marbles, this was the result. So you see in red, there are 2 objects there, fakes, not genuine at all. You've never seen them on display. You will never see them on display unless we have an exhibition about fakes, which I would love to do. With our friend Hercules, with the yellow square around it, it is also not ancient. It is a work that I'm just going to skip. So Bacchus, we reunited his limbs. This is what happened with Hercules. And it's basically an 18th century creation meant to satisfy collectors' needs for those who liked those kinds of sculpture. And it took our consultant years to figure this out. And not just figure it out, but like be 100% certain. Because if you say an antiquity is fake, especially in the classical world, there's no turning back. If it's fake forever. So you need to be 100,000% certain. Luckily, the information came in just before the reinstall in 2022. So this object, even though technically it is a fake, is considered a work of in 18th century Italy, and it has been brought into the European collection. So we wanted to study the glass fairly early on as well, because there are a lot of glass pieces in the collection, mostly Roman. So that's a lot of things to study. Here we have two scholars who worked on this. The first one, Janet Jones from Bucknell University. She studied the objects, sent in the reports, and unfortunately could not continue with this multi-year project. But wisely, she sent me a list. She's like, Caroline, these are 5 scholars that I will trust with my research and for them to write the entries based on my research. So I called the first one because I knew them and they were unavailable. Called the second one and she was thrilled, like absolutely love working with Janet, really respect the scholar, happy to write the entries based on her research. This person, Carrie Swan, at the time was at University College London, Qatar campus. And she had a few questions. She wanted to see some of the objects, which is very far away. We're really far away from Qatar, but thanks to some of our tech wizards in the building here, we were able to do this virtually. So that's scary. That's the object that she wanted to see, one of them, and we're doing this virtually. And she's like, oh, move it to the right. Oh, flip it this way. And she's giving us instructions so that she can see what exactly she wants to see to answer the question that she had. And it totally worked. You can't date glass. You can't take samples and date glass. So it's really all stylistic. And sometimes that's all you can do with a collection. So with the study here, you see some yellow stuff. They're not fakes. They're just not ancient. They're much later, and they're Islamic glass pieces. So clearly not ancient Italy, Greece, and Rome. The pink highlight is one that we, and when I say we, Carrie and Janet, couldn't quite figure out. It was either ancient or 19th century. It could go either way. It is in the catalog, and I think they explain why we're not sure. And this green one, the pointulated one, is, well, that's not glass. It was in the glass collection, but when you look at it, it's like, wait, it's ceramic. So we'll have to put this in a different collection, which was the Roman ceramics collection. The next one was the Greek research for the ceramics. Unfortunately, our scholar studied the pieces here at the museum and could not continue with the project, but I didn't even have reports. Like something happened and it was impossible for them to actually do the task that they had been contracted to do. So kind of put that on hold, but Corey came and looked at those objects because there's always a conservation assessment. So we did that. Sometimes we do that in the galleries or in the lab. And when we remove the objects from the galleries, we have the little labels that tells you why these have been removed. So the next one, we moved not so quickly. We're now in 2016, looking at the Etruscan and early Italian pieces with Nancy de Drummond. This is a lovely picture of her. This piece was actually in her dissertation a long time ago. I think she obtained her PhD in 69, 68, something like this. And this object is dear to her heart, and you can tell. So she studied these objects, and in the file, because the research is not just looking at the objects, it's also looking at the curatorial file. And there was this really strange photo that you see right here of what we called artifacts in the wild. And curators who are archaeologists find this a little bit scary, because back in the 70s, for example, this is what tomb robbers would do: pose artifacts on the stone or something on the sand, take photos, Polaroids. And basically, that's how they would advertise their wares to sell. Because if you use a film camera, you send that off to the place that develops your film, someone might be suspicious that you constantly have photos of artifacts in the wild. And so Nancy flagged this, this is a little bit strange. The object she was studying was this one, which is right over here. And she's like, let's just put it there, and we'll get back to it. So part of the research that I did was the provenance research, of the ownership history research. And I came back to this much later, looking at the files, and many of the donors to the museum have collected in different areas. And my colleague Lyle Humphrey, one of our European curators, had to go through some of those files because, for whatever reason, sometimes you say ancient object, also see other file for more information. So we're looking at each other's files, and I'm like, what are these objects? What does this mean? Whoops, wrong button. Are these looted or no? And since I mentioned we'd done this a few years after, actually, I figured out this is in the Greek collection, which we hadn't studied because that thing didn't happen. This is another piece, but it's deaccessioned, so it's not in the museum's collection anymore, and neither is this one. But they were all in our collection at some point in time. What are they doing all together? Because they're not all Etruscan. Well, I found the answer in a deaccessioned European sculpture file. And this is the photo here, another artifact in the wild, but it's actually a statue at Fred Olsen's mansion. And he and the then, I think, deputy director were talking about acquiring objects. This is in 1957. So the clue to the identity of this photo was that he had taken photos of his objects. It's these are things you might consider for your collection. But because that photo was in the file with no notes whatsoever, for us, it was a red flag. So we had to investigate. So sometimes you do have some weird little side adventures trying to figure out what is going on. The answer was in a European deaccessioned file. Nancy really loved this pot. I do too. There's a beautiful carving around it, engraving. You can't really appreciate it when you look at the pot. So Dan made a drawing of this, and it's the cutest thing ever. And we can start on this side. So there's a doe, a deer, a female deer, nursing her fawn right over here. And there's Papa Deer with a wonderful set of antlers with what I'm assuming is the pet goose, about to get his rump chomped by this lion. And this is the world's cutest lion. It looks like it was drawn by a 4-year-old. It is absolutely adorable. You can't really see this when you look at the object. The lion's actually right here. And that's probably the side where the pot was lying down when it was discovered. So with these drawings, and Nancy was adamant, it's like we need to have drawings so that we can fully appreciate these scenes. So you'll see a few drawings in the catalog, and I'm grateful to Dan for taking on the task of actually drawing them. So the result of the study, absolutely nothing wrong with these objects. Moving on, South Italian ceramics, a slightly bigger collection with some wonderful pieces. And for this study, we had Keely Hoyer, who's at SUNY New Paltz, and Corey was there as well. And you see some of our art handlers lifting some of the bigger pots, just like paintings where you look at the back. Pots, you need to look inside, outside, underneath, everywhere. We do the UV with those objects as well, not just the marbles. So you see some of that here. This particular pot here is hollow, like there's no bottom. The proof, that's my face saying, looking at the top. And so you can see right through. That's for the oils for the offering to seep into the ground. This is a big, huge grave marker. But when we did the UV examination, what was interesting was, you see it a little bit here, a whole lot more there, that really bright orange fluorescent material. And we're like, is this an actual pigment? Is this fake? Because in normal light, it looks really, really pink. And so we decided to take samples of that. So we see here our former chief conservator, Bill Brown, taking a sample, and those samples were sent to Italy. We have connections with some of the universities in different parts of the world, but one certainly in Pisa with Perla Colombini, who also does stuff for Duke University. So that's where the connection comes from. And that pigment is actually, yes, genuine. It is Madder Lake. And yes, that pink is that pink. So these South Italian pots are the Italian part of the Greek, Italian, and Roman. We have Etruscan, we have Gnathian, we have a bunch of other things like Apulian that nobody knows anything of unless you're actually a scholar. So we just labeled it as Italian. And that was something I really wanted to do for the reinstall in 22, to be inclusive of these indigenous Italian cultures that eventually just got lumped into the Roman Empire. But the ones with the pink pigment, that tells you it is indigenous. There were a lot of Greek colonies in South Italy, so you also have Greek-like pots in that area. They're really working in the Greek tradition. So for this one, the study was really the pigment sampling that you see here. Absolutely nothing wrong with this collection. Everything is peachy keen. Well, that was a small collection, one object, the Cycladic figure. And Nick Blackwell is a specialist of that area. And he looked at it, but Mark, because it's in marble, Mark also looked at it and shared his marble impressions with us, and we shared with Nick. And with these kinds of objects, they're smaller, they're not big like Hercules, for example. You do not want to sample them because that will really mar the aesthetic of the object. And one of the things with a lot of these Cycladic figures is that a lot of them came from the art market quite a while ago. You know, when modern art was the rage, So in the early like 1900s, for example, these look so modern, and there has to be fakes on the market at that point. But because you can't just drill a hole in this thing, right? You can't test the marble, but you also can't date marble. So because all of these cyclitic figures, this one belongs to the Steiner Master. They're all from museum collections that have purchased on the art market. We can't tell, is it genuine or is it not? We cannot confirm. Right now, we're assuming it is genuine. It is a beloved object in our collection. So that's what it is. But as Nick was saying, more and more excavations in the Cyclades where objects of this type are popping out of the ground legally through real excavations, there are some that look really close. So we're hopeful. But it's one of those things where you can't actually solve the mystery. There are no tests that will help you. And even the greatest connoisseurship is not, I don't want to say it's not good enough. It's like it just can't solve that little mystery. So we're going for it's real. All good, kosher, moving on. So there's that little vessel that was in the glass section. That's not a glass piece. Looking at the Roman ceramics, I will speed up a little bit. And here, ceramics, you can date. So our study, our consultants was Laurel Taylor at Asheville, and you see Corey here yet again. We wanted to do a really funky artsy shot with one of the objects, because that's the use of this object. It's like a jack-o'-lantern Roman style. So there is that hole at the back. So our photographers tried different kinds of light bulbs, little, like artificial candles to put it in there to make it fit to get the impression that there is a little candle inside there. So that was kind of fun. It took them a few shots to try to figure that out. Now, we did TL dating for this piece because our consultant wasn't sure, is this real? Is this not real? So TL dating is one of the dating methods that works for ceramics, because we're basically checking the radioactivity, low-level radioactivity of sediments, burnstones, or ceramic objects, because they have been fired, okay? Now, in a lab, someone will test those samples. So we took the samples, and this is us taking the samples. And you're like, Caroline, there's no pictures. You have to do this in the dark. Drill a hole with a diamond bit in an object in the dark. I'm the person who holds the red light so that the conservator can see what they're doing. Your sample cannot be exposed to any kind of light whatsoever. So you dig a hole, you drill a hole, discard whatever powder comes out, then you dig, I'm an archaeologist, I don't drill, I dig. So you drill again, collect that powder, just like you're drilling into a dry wall, that powder that comes out, same thing. Then you put that in a little vial, you put that in an envelope, you put that in a slightly bigger envelope, you put that in a slightly bigger envelope, and then you put it in a box, and then you mail it up to Oxford, UK. This is what their labs look like. It's basically like developing negatives back in the good old days. Guess what the result was? Who says it's real? I see a few hands. Who says it's not real? It was made about 100 years ago, so not Roman. You will never see this object at all. With the bronze, so very small collection, but very interesting. Carol Matouche was our consultant for this. Again, Corey Riley, Riley Conservation Services is here to help out and do the conservation assessment. With this, again, there's little dating, it's mostly stylistic and things like this, but you can sample with an XRF, that zapper Star Trek phaser looking thing, and that gives you the elemental composition of whatever the material is. And I guess metal bronze specialists like to weigh things. So we have our head on the mailroom scale right here. Um, Adventures in curation and conservation. We can do x-rays, and that one slide here, you can tell that some of those sculptures are hollow and others are solid. The weight is kind of a dead giveaway, but you know, we have gizmos, we can use them. So result of the study, all good, all kosher. Murphy's Law, however, this shovel, that's what it's called, an instant shovel. In 2020, I got an email from the art handlers saying, hey, we found some bronze thing. It looks ancient. Like, why did that not pop up in our search, in our database for Roman bronzes? Well, that's because it was listed as Judaic. Roman period, Judea. So I was like, okay, let me just put this in the back in my head and we'll figure this out later. In 22, I get an email from a German scholar who wanted to use a photo of our, what was then called a chariot finial, for one of his articles. And so like, yes, call this person, they will give you rights in repro, you can use the photograph, not a problem. Like, just by the way, we're writing the catalog. This has been renamed. Like, for life of me, I forgot the actual name of the object. Renamed, and it's a chariot finial. And he responds like, nope, it's a lamp handle. Like, okay, so I send Carol an email. Like, okay, this guy in Germany says this. And she's like, who's this guy? I give her the name. Like, oh yeah, he's right. So this is what it would have looked like. A big metal lamp with, and from the, I think the German, like translating, a reflector, basically. But you can see here, that's where you put your finger through to hold it. So there you go. You'll see both, obviously, in the catalog. And the shovel is a short entry at the back with all the duplicates for the glass pieces, because if it's exactly the same style of all the others, there's only so much you can say about a glass vessel. We didn't want to repeat anything, so we have the dog tag information, the conservation blurbs, everything in the short entries at the back. Another single object collection, counting sherds, not sherds, tesserae. My friend Deb Foran from Waterloo, we went to school together, and she is a marble mosaic specialist. I'm like, I know someone directly. Let me give them a ring. The fun thing about this particular object is that it is from France. Now, I'm going to ask you a trick question. Do any of you know these guys over here? Yes, thank you. I really put that there. I think my dad might be watching. Hi, Dad. Hello, Papa. He said if he can't watch, you know, sometimes golf, he wants to see the recording. So I put that there for him, because Roman, France, Gaul, that's pretty cool, actually. So all kosher, all good. We're almost there, but not really. I'm going to go faster. So Mycenaean ceramics, you're not going to poke holes into this to date anything. Our specialist, Brian Burns from Wesley College. What do you think? Yes, very good. Nothing wrong with these. So really early stuff here. So finally, we get to the Greek material, because you remember Keely, who studied the South Italian stuff? When she asked me, like, who did your Greek things? Like, well, nobody, it fell through. It was like, I'll do them. I'm like you do Egypt and Sudan. I do South Italy and Greece. I'm like, excellent, you're hired. She submitted everything on time and whatnot. So, whoops, let's go back. And Keely even did a video for us. There she is selling her wares. And this was for the docents and other things where she's talking about the different shapes of the pots and how they're used and things like this. More line drawings, you can't really see this unless you actually see a drawing, a flat out, a rollout. Now with this collection, what does red mean? Just like the emperor of the games, right? It's a fake. The thing is, there was an article published in the 60s in the file that said it was a fake, but it was listed as a replica. Like, okay, you know, museums need to acknowledge they can have fakes in their collections. It's okay. Now, something momentous happened in 2018, because that's where we are in our chronology. And some of you will say, yes, that's when the Bacchus project started. No, it's when Corey Riley became an objects conservator at the museum. We did it through the normal channels. She applied, we interviewed a bunch of people, and we picked her. She'd been working for us for like 5 years. So she owes her job to Bacchus. That became a side project because it's really focusing on one object. It was one heck of a ride. You had to do this within 3 years. And this was possible because of grants, Bank of America, IMLS, and additional support from Don and Peggy, hello, and Stephen Frozine, which I'm hoping are watching. If not, they're going to get the recording as well. And we have people who helped us kind of round it up because that's what we do with matching grants. The grant tour wants us to find the same amount that they've given. So Spiro Macros and Doris Wareham helped round things up a little bit. I have a lot of files about Bacchus in case you were wondering. So what we knew, well, we knew was this headless naked guy in the Kunstkammer, and that the head had been removed and it was in JP Morgan's collection, for example. So this is what it looked like when it came to the museum, that photo right here. But my predecessor, looking at the file, had read some documents that had suggested to the museum that this statue be de-restored to free the antiquities. And that is why the head was removed and all the non-ancient part of the head were taken off, the hair, and the nose is not original, but they went, he doesn't look so sexy without his nose. So Bacchus got a nose job, and the head was in the ancient collection, but the body languished in storage for a very long time. So that's the letter that said you should de-restore this statue. And the reason for this was that it was very similar to these other 4 torsos. And you'll notice that the only one that's not in Europe is right here. So we came up with a project to study this sculpture. And these are all the people who studied, and we'll go through some of the cool things that they did, starting with what Corey and I did, which was to go see those other torsos. In this case, I was all by me lonesome. Corey couldn't join me. But looking at the statues and looking at how they are put together, because they too are Mr. Potato Head sculptures. And Bacchus actually makes us famous because anybody who studies ancient marbles and those torsos will see North Carolina listed as one of the similar torsos. So that's one of our claims to fame. So we went to see the one in Naples. So looking at the sculpture, and I'm going to diverge for a second here. We get there and the gallery is closed. We're like, no, look, I have an email from the director that I can go and see this thing. And so we're talking with somebody at like the bookstore, and they call a security guard and they call somebody else. And finally they let us in to go see the statue. And of course, all the other visitors are like, why are they in there? Why can't I go? Well, it's because you're not doing research on these sculptures. We even went into their library and archives. This one was not on view at all. And because we had a really great project, we were granted access. Not many scholars have actually seen this particular torso. That's the one that does not have any limbs. Here when Rome, doing the same thing. It was just one big, huge Italy trip. And another, when I was standing on this ladder at some point, I was commiserating, saying how hard it was to find a scholar who specialized in composite sculptures. They only do ancient sculptures or Renaissance or neoclassical sculptures. Nobody wants to study the Mr. Potato Head sculptures. Mark is an expert of the ancient stuff. He doesn't do the composite. Well, now I guess he's got some experience. So we are trying to find somebody, and I'm there on top of this ladder taking photos, and she's like, oh, I know somebody. Excellent. We'll see him in a minute. We went to Bacchus's old digs. We found out, we meaning Mark, found out that the statue was part of the Palazzo Altemps collection at some point before it came into JP Morgan's collection. So of course we had to go see where it was. And this is what the document that Mark had shared with us. It was in this grand staircase. So at the Palazzo Altemps, we're really looking at materials, tool marks, and they're like, what are these two geeks doing? Like taking photos of things, and half the time it looks like we're taking photos of the butts of the marble sculptures, which we are, but we aren't. Anyways, it makes for great fun on social media. It's like, what are you ladies doing? It's like, well, you know, there are marble boyfriends. Anyways, so structured light, we wanted a 3D scan of Bacchus. Thank you, David Bassett at ScanSite. That was the first thing we did in terms of the analyses and whatnot. Because one of the things we wanted to do was continue the de-restoration process, but because we kept discovering bits and pieces of information that told us that the limbs were very important. They belonged, like that statue belonged to the Altemps collection. We didn't want to just discard those extra limbs. So the hope was to create a different kind of Mr. Potato Head with 3D scans of the marble antiquities and adding that to the old but not ancient limbs. And there we go, drilling. This is where the fragments are from, all over the place. And Bacchus, like Fabio, has lovely Italian hair. And then we're taking samples of just about everything we can sample, patinas, the metals and the rods and things like this. And then that guy that was suggested, you need to talk to this person, Fernando Lofredo. He's Italian, but he happened to be in New York. I'm like, yes, even better. So he came down to Raleigh, looked at this, and he and the previous scholar, Jennifer Mass, who took the samples, came to the same exact conclusion. Bacchus, that recreation dates to the 18th century. It is not like Renaissance. It is definitely 18th century. Now, the thing is, what we learned from Fernando was also that it could have been in the Palazzo Altemps much earlier, because there's inventory that goes back to like 16 something, but that would have been the torso. The limbs might have been different, because lo and behold, you can change your composite sculpture to meet the current fashions. So I would love to see an image of something listed as a Bacchus in 16 something Palazzo Altemps archives. If it's the same torso, it would be the same statue. If it's not, it wouldn't. But at least we have it going to 1836, which is pretty decent. We need an engineer. Can we do this project? We send him the scans. We send him a whole bunch of stuff. We find new information as well. Lyle was at the Morgan Library researching something completely different and happened to fall on something like a box that had a lot of Bacchus material. So suddenly my phone. I'm working at my desk and I ping, 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 ping. All these texts are coming in and it's live. I was like, hey, I found this. Hey, I found that. I'm taking photocopies, I'm pictures, and she's sending me all the stuff. It's like, excellent. Do you want to be part of the Bacchus project? Oddly enough, I had found that same image at our own library here, like the week prior. So we have new information, and the new information that's very important. Whoops, where's my, right here. There's an arm. Just like the other drawing we saw from the Palazzo Altum, there's an arm. That's super important. Keep that in mind. We're almost there. So the engineer told us, you cannot do what you had planned. If you remove the torso, that's fine. The remaining limbs will not be structurally sound. Even if you put a 3D scanned torso, your statue will not, it just, don't do it. So, well, we thought about it for a second. We have all this information. We know where it was in 1836. We know there's an arm right there, right there. It's like, why don't we just recreate, just like put the statue back together again? That's what they do these days. We don't de-restore things just to showcase the antiquities. The composite statues also have a history. Why would you discard part of that history? So that was the plan. Let's put Bacchus together again. And then my crazy, crazy idea, because of this, I asked Corey, what if we recreate that arm? And she said, yes. You want to know why? Because we knew what the statue looked like before. This is not some fanciful recreation. We have a previous state of the statue. And because it is a composite statue, it has all the holes and things that we can use to put the arm, a newly created arm, without actually doing anything to the sculpture. It is a mechanical join. You remove the screw, you take the arm off, and now we have to do this because Bacchus can't go through doorways. He's too tall. So that's a very good thing. So that was the crazy idea. So we sent Bacchus to the spa to get cleaned up with lasers, erasers, gels, poultices, yada, yada, yada. We restored the head, put the berries back on, changed all the pins. This is what it looked like. Now you have to put the head on the body. It was an ordeal. You had to practice a few times, and it had to sit there for 3 months in the conservation lab while the adhesives cured. Then there was in painting to make these ugly fills look better. And then the artist wanted a model for his project, which was to recreate the arm, and he went to NC State. Wyatt Walker actually didn't believe Larry the first time Larry reached out to him. He thought it was being punked or something or whatever. And Larry's like, Caroline, you have to write me a letter. It's like, yes, I will put this on museum letterhead, which I did, send that off. He got the letter and he asked his mom, and his mom said, kid, you got to do this. So thank you, Wyatt's mom. And so Wyatt, for a part of an afternoon, was the model of an artist. And so that's how the arm was recreated. And so there's photos, and there's a 3D scan that was taken by Heather Pendrak. And then Larry made the arm. Then it was attached to the statue, and it was painted to make it look like it fit. But there's actually a very visible join to let people know that that's the recreation. Now you think we're done. We're not done, sorry. We're now in 2020, we're almost there. 2020, part of this Bacchus project was an exhibition. It opened, I think, March 7. March 14, we're on lockdown. All the programs we had planned, we need to backtrack, get virtual, and there I am cooking a Roman recipe in my apartment. Corey is doing some conservation project with her kids, shattering flower pots and then putting them back together again. So Bacchus is just one of the things that disrupted the catalog process. So did the pandemic. So we still have these objects to study. Luckily, it's just 2 objects. We find a scholar. So we're in 2021. We started in 2013. And our scholar, unfortunately, was not able, she sent the report, but was not able to continue on with the project. So I ended up writing that catalog entry. But we had a little mystery to solve because one of the descriptions says that this thing here was a panther. We're not quite sure. It could be a tree trunk because, well, there's these are acorns. They look like acorns. These are grapes. So we went to the science museums. Like, they have really big microscopes over there. So we looked at the ring. So Mariana and I went over our conservation tech, looked at this with Chris Tacker, their geology curator. We also made impressions of the ring to try to figure out, is it a tree trunk? Is it a panther? And well, we don't know. This is teeny. It's the size of my pinky nail. That's like minuscule. But the research was this. So this other ring, we're not quite sure. Because the problem with it is when you have a ring and you go like this, show it to a person, you need to see the image as if the person is looking at the scene. Or you flip it the other way and you go like this, like, oh, I've got a really pretty ring. This ring, the image is sideways, which didn't really sit with us. And we're like, oh, maybe it's a scarf ring. So that if you put your scarf sideways, you would see, you do have the Nike and Victory on ancient things, but there were just a few things that were just, So, yes. So finally, we're done with the study of the objects, but to race to the finish line, you still have all of this to do. And this is last year, basically, because I'll just have you note right here, the last entries came in last year. I won't tell you which ones. And we're working like crazy. We've been working on this for 12 years at this point. It needs to get out the door. We want to move on to other projects. And so last year was completely nuts trying to finish this catalog. And so the copies were actually delivered in April. And here we are, right here. And then I can say, tick the box, I'm done. We're not going to take questions, but there's some books over there for you to purchase and for me to sign if you would like. My John Hancock. Like, for a Canadian, that's like a weird thing, but whatever. If you'd like your copy signed, I'd be happy to do that for you. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank, there's some of our sponsors who are in here. I know some are also watching online. Thank you to all of you for your support over the years. We hope to see you at the Friends of Greek Art lecture, first Sunday in October. We're going to learn about Roman piggy banks with Robin LeBlanc, who's a professor at UNC Greensboro. So see you in October or outside in the lobby. Thank you.